Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, get ready. Because today we're plunging into a moment that, well, it wasn't just a soccer match. It was uh, the very first step onto this brand new, massive global stage. We're talking about the opening game of the expanded 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. I mean, this wasn't just any old game. It was the official kickoff, the big start to a tournament FIFA is really betting on, hoping to redefine club soccer worldwide, expanding to a huge 32 teams. And our mission, like always here on the Deep Dive, is to take this stack of source material you, our listener, sent us about this specific match, all the articles, the analyses, the notes, and really extract every single nugget of knowledge, every surprising insight, and understand all the dramatic twists and turns that made this particular game just so significant. And the matchup they served up for this historic opener, well, it was pure global intrigue, wasn't it? Representing Major League Soccer, you had Inter Miami CF. Now, this is a team that really, since the arrival of global icon Lionel Messi, has become, well, one source called them a star-studded battleship. Pretty evocative, huh? For Miami, and honestly for the entire MLS, this felt like the ultimate test. This was their big chance, stepping onto the biggest international club stage and trying to prove that the league, and yeah, its top team, could genuinely compete with the world's elite, not just, be a collection of famous names. And Messi, in the sources you gave us, is explicitly called the flag bearer for this whole mission. Pretty heavy responsibility facing them. A true continental giant, Al Ahly SC, the absolute powerhouse of African soccer. I mean, these guys are seasoned veterans, African Champions League regulars, often dominating, known for that formidable physical presence, tactical discipline, and just deep experience on the biggest stages in African club soccer. So for Al Ahly, this was their opportunity, right, to show the global soccer community, hey, the African champion belongs right here among the world's best, and we can challenge teams stacked with superstars.
Exactly. And your sources. They lay out the scene for us with real precision. The date was June 15th, 2025. The setting, right there in Miami Gardens, Florida, kind of fitting for a game featuring Inter Miami, wasn't it? The historical significance, as you rightly highlighted, it's immense. This match isn't just a game, it's the game. The one that officially inaugurated this entirely new, expanded 32-team format of the FIFA Club World Cup. And this expansion, it wasn't just some administrative tweak. It represented, and your sources really emphasize this, FIFA's explicit ambition to fundamentally transform this tournament. From what maybe some people saw in the past as perhaps a more niche event, often kind of predictable, maybe dominated by one confederation. FIFA wants this to be seen, and importantly to be a genuine, and they use this phrase, a club soccer world championship. So this specific opening match, this was the first real, tangible, on-field step in trying to make that incredibly ambitious vision for global club soccer a reality. Now, the final score, as the sources jump right into, was 0-0, a goalless draw. Okay, now for a lot of soccer fans, maybe even most, a 0-0 scoreline might instantly bring thoughts of, a dull defensive slog, a game lacking excitement, lacking quality. But, and this is crucial, your sources are absolutely emphatic in challenging that assumption for this specific match. They make it abundantly clear that the lack of goals did not mean a lack of action or drama or those captivating moments. Quite the contrary, actually. The sources consistently highlight the tension, the sheer number of near misses, the incredible quality of chances created, and particularly the truly outstanding performances of certain players. All this meant the match was anything but boring. It was incredibly compelling, despite that 0-0 scoreline. It wasn't a 0-0 because, attackers couldn't find openings or the defenses were these impenetrable units. No, it was 0-0 because something truly extraordinary, something almost individual and heroic was happening again and again to stop the ball from hitting the back of the net.
And that's exactly the fascinating story your sources dig into for us, peeling back the layers behind that, well, seemingly quiet scoreline. The core theme that really emerges, the central narrative thread running through all the material you've shared with us, is that this entire battle, this historic opening act for the new CWC, it wasn't defined by the strikers finding the net. No, it was defined by the truly incredible, you might even say superheroic, performances of the two goalkeepers. It really boiled down to a goalkeeper's duel, didn't it? A head-to-head contest between the two guys in goal that just completely dictated the outcome of this match.
Absolutely. And your sources provide such a meticulous account, guiding us through the entire flow of the game. They detail the ebb and the flow. They pinpoint the key moments where the game could have just changed dramatically. They note the tactical shifts the teams try to implement. And they offer, pretty clear evaluations of individual player performances. So our mission here, as we dive deep into all this material you sent, is to meticulously break down every significant detail the sources offer. We want to reconstruct exactly how this dramatic 0-0 unfolded, minute by minute, half by half, viewing the whole game through the precise lens of the information you've provided. And crucially, we want to understand the broader implications of this specific result. What does it mean for these two teams? What does it signal about the tournament format itself? And what kind of expectations does it set for the competitiveness of this new global club competition going forward?
So, drawing purely from the rich material you've shared with us, the central question this deep dive is going to thoroughly answer is this. How on earth did a match featuring attacking talent of the absolute highest order, with players like Lionel Messi on the field, and without a single goal being scored? And what does that remarkable goalless outcome, which was actually filled with drama and individual brilliance, tell us about the strengths, maybe the weaknesses of these particular teams? What about the decisive impact of key individuals on a match's result? And even maybe the potential direction and competitiveness of this brand new expanded tournament format that FIFA's launching?
Okay, armed with your sources, let's really unpack this. Let's start by really anchoring ourselves in the context, just like the sources do. June 15th, 2025, Miami Gardens. Now, this wasn't just one game squeezed into a busy schedule. The sources really underscore that it was the opening match of the expanded FIFA Club World Cup. And that wasn't just, random scheduling. It felt like a statement.
So why is this new tournament format, this big move to 32 teams, such a monumental event for the sport, according to the sources you provided?
Well, the sources are pretty explicit, aren't they? They state this expanded version represents FIFA's clear attempt, their major ambition, to truly establish the Club World Cup as a genuine club soccer world championship. It's framed as a deliberate, really significant step. The expansion to 32 teams isn't some minor tweak. The sources present it as a major historical milestone for club soccer globally, dramatically increasing the scale, the global representation, and, well, the overall prestige compared to those previous, much smaller formats.
Yeah, and your source material gives us some valuable context by kind of contrasting this new vision with past versions of the CWC. The sources suggest that maybe previous formats were perceived, perhaps by a wider global audience outside Europe and South America, as less engaging. Maybe feeling a bit more like end-of-season exhibition matches, or just heavily dominated predictably by teams from one or two confederations. The argument, drawing straight from your sources, is that this new expanded 32-team format, kicking off with a really high-profile match like Inter Miami versus Al Ahly, is explicitly designed to shatter that perception, to replace it with the image of a genuinely competitive, globally representative tournament right from the very first game. And the significance for the two teams involved, as detailed directly in the source material you shared, deeply reinforces this high-stakes context. For Inter Miami, just participating in this tournament, and specifically facing a recognized continental powerhouse like Al Ahly in this opener, it was framed as this crucial identity-defining test. The sources describe them using that language like Messi's star-studded battleship. This wasn't just a chance to play in a big tournament. It was their moment to prove they weren't merely, a marketing phenomenon or just a curiosity because Messi was there. They had to show they had the quality, the structure to compete effectively at a truly global standard. And crucially, it was also framed as this opportunity to showcase and maybe validate the level of Major League Soccer itself on the international stage. The source mentions their recent domestic success winning the MLS Supporters' Shield and the League's Cup since Messi arrived, and links this World Cup performance directly to their broader mission, elevating MLS's global profile. Messi, in this narrative from the sources, is explicitly and significantly called out as the flag bearer for both the club and the league on this huge international stage. That's quite a label. And for Al Ahly, their motivation, their objective in this match, according to your source material, was equally clear and powerful. Proved the inherent strength, the tactical sophistication, the sheer quality of the African champions. This was their prime opportunity to directly challenge world-class teams featuring global superstars and demand that respect. The sources highlight their established status regulars, often dominators, in the African Champions League. They note their well-regarded physical attributes, kind of recognized as a hallmark of top African teams, and their tactical discipline, acknowledging them as a top-tier African club. So this opening match was their vital platform to demonstrate that African club soccer belongs unequivocally at the highest global level.
Right, and adding another immediate layer of intensity, of drama, your sources place this game squarely within the group stage format. And these two teams, they're not in some easy group. They are in what the sources explicitly call a group of death. They're alongside formidable opponents like FC Porto from Portugal and Palmeiras from Brazil. Wow. So in a group stacked with that much quality where only two teams can possibly advance to the knockout rounds, why does a 0-0 draw right out of the gate make every single point earned or maybe dropped so incredibly crucial from the very first whistle?
Well, it's pretty straightforward, isn't it? With only 2 spots up for grabs in such a competitive 4-team group, the stakes just couldn't be higher from day one. You absolutely have to start gathering points immediately, especially against teams that are direct rivals for those qualification spots. Or, in a challenging opening game like this, that could really set the tone. Earning a point from a draw means, okay, you're not starting from zero, you're on the board. But it also means you didn't get the full 3 points that would give you a significant early advantage, maybe a bit of breathing room.
Exactly. The source analysis suggests this draw immediately sets this tense, pressurized tone for the rest of the group stage for both teams. Neither team gets an early upper hand over the other, right? And the pressure is significantly intensified for their next matches against Porto and Palmeiras. Any subsequent dropped points, particularly in a group where other strong contenders are fiercely competing for those precious top 2 spots, could easily prove fatal to their hopes of qualifying for the knockouts. It instantly ratchets up the drama, the stakes for the entire group, right from the very first result. Now, one of the strongest assertions made in your source material is that this specific 0-0 draw, and crucially how it unfolded the competitive process of the match itself, the quality of the chances, and especially those standout goalkeeper performances, set an incredibly high competitive tone for this new CWC format right from the start. Let's really dig into why the source makes this point so emphatically. The sources draw this deliberate contrast between this result and how past CWC formats were sometimes perceived. Like we touched on, those tournaments were, in some views, maybe dominated by European teams, occasionally feeling almost like these preordained paths to a final, maybe like exhibition matches rather than hard-fought competitions. So the sources argue that seeing the African champions, Al Ahly, not only hold Messi's Miami to a draw, but, according to the descriptions you sent, even managed to dominate significant portions of the first half well, that fundamentally and immediately challenges that old perception. It demonstrates that the perceived gap between confederations, maybe it isn't insurmountable after all, not even in the very first match. This is a really crucial point the sources highlight, this 0-0 draw featuring intense moments, high-quality chances at both ends, and world-class saves, rather than just, passive, cautious play. It serves as a powerful counter-argument, a counter to any assumption that teams from certain dominant confederations will just easily roll over opposition from game one. Instead, the sources argue, this match established the tournament right from the beginning as a real, quote-unquote, Ugun, which, translates literally as true swords, true guns. Basically, a genuinely competitive, hard-fought, world-class event. It signals that every single team needs to be at their absolute best. And how does this, according to the sources, add suspense and viewing pleasure? Well, the sources imply that this result, this demonstration of competitive parity, it creates a much more compelling narrative, particularly for teams and fans outside of the traditionally dominant European and South American confederations. It provides this tangible example, right from the very first match, that teams from Africa, Asia, North America, wherever, can compete. They can get results. And that this tournament is a genuine battleground, where clubs from any confederation have a real opportunity to prove their strength and challenge for the title on the global stage. This uncertainty, this possibility, makes the whole tournament feel more unpredictable, more open, and therefore significantly more exciting to watch.
Okay, let's move from the context and the implications and really zoom in on the match itself now, starting with the first half. Your sources paint a very clear, almost stark picture of how the game began. Al Ahly came out with incredible intensity, serious attacking intent. Describe their approach in detail, as laid out in the sources you sent. What was their game plan, and how did they execute it initially? They were relentless, weren't they? The sources strongly highlight their aggressive attacking desire right from the opening whistle. They coupled this with a high press, clearly trying to apply pressure immediately deep in Miami's half, force mistakes, quick turnovers. Their attacking approach was characterized by fast passing, moving the ball quickly, and effective wing penetration, getting wide, creating threats from the flanks. The sources are quite explicit. Al Ahly completely controlled the pace of the match in those early stages.
Yes. The sources emphasize that Al Ahly's well-regarded physical advantage, their strength, their conditioning, and their overall cohesion as a team, which is built over consistent campaigns together, were immediately and powerfully evident. They were simply out of the blocks much faster. They seemed tactically sharper, clearly prepared to take control of the tempo and impose their game on Miami right from the get-go. Now let's contrast that with how Inter Miami started the game based on the descriptions in your sources. The portrayal is quite critical, actually. They were described as Yuto, which translates directly to slow to get going. This implies a real lack of intensity or readiness compared to Al Ahly. A major tactical issue the sources highlight is a significant lack of midfield control. And perhaps the most critical point raised about Miami's early struggles is that specific detail. Sergio Busquets, their experienced, deep-lying playmaker, the guy usually responsible for controlling tempo and providing defensive cover in the middle, was easily bypassed in the midfield. So what does that actually mean, practically on the field when a player like Busquets is easily bypassed? Well, it means Al Ahly's midfielders and attackers were able to move past him too easily, maybe with dribbling, quick passes around him, or just sheer pace. This is critical because Busquets typically acts as that crucial shield in front of the defense, and he's the primary link for building attacks. When he's bypassed, your central defense is immediately exposed without that vital screen. It also severely disrupts your ability to build play smoothly from the back or through the midfield. Makes it incredibly difficult to connect effectively with the attacking players further up the field, including Messi. Your sources suggest Miami struggled precisely with this, getting the ball forward cleanly and effectively to their dangerous front players.
And despite the scoreboard staying stubbornly at 0-0 throughout that first half, your sources make it crystal clear this wasn't because of a lack of attacking threat, particularly from Al Ahly. They created significant, even golden chances. Detail these moments using the specific, vivid language the sources provide. Really convey the level of danger Miami was facing.
Yeah, the sources are quite direct, aren't they? Unambiguous. They state flat out that Al Ahly should have taken the lead early. Now, that's not just a passive observation. It's an assessment from the sources of the clear-cut nature, the high threat level of those early opportunities. We're told Al Ahly forced Óscar Ustari into back-to-back saves early in the game. And these saves, the sources note, came from well-crafted moves by Al Ahly. So what does back-to-back saves imply about the pressure Miami was under? It tells us this wasn't just one isolated chance, it was sustained pressure, multiple high-quality attempts on goal arriving in quick succession. It indicates Miami's defense was genuinely struggling to contain Al Ahly's attack. They were under intense siege.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the sources specifically detail another significant moment in the 32nd minute. Al Ahly once again produced a well-crafted move, a sign of their tactical cohesion, which resulted in a close-range header inside the box. And once again, this dangerous opportunity was met by the resistance of Ustari. His action is described by the sources as an instinctive stop. This pattern well-worked Al Ahly chances, created through good build-up play, being denied only by the goalkeeper's individual brilliance, is a dominant theme for the first half in your source material. It really underscores just how much pressure Miami was absorbing and how absolutely critical Ustari was. Now, the major turning point of that first half, the moment that perhaps best encapsulated Al Ahly's dominance and Miami's reliance on their goalkeeper, as highlighted by the sources, occurred in the 43rd minute. Al Ahly were awarded a penalty. Experienced player Trezeguet stepped up to take it. Huge moment. Your sources detail Ustari's action in this crucial moment precisely. He judged correctly, anticipated the direction, diving left, and successfully pushing it away. The sources don't mince words describing the significance. They call the penalty a golden opportunity for Al Ahly to finally translate their dominance into a lead just before halftime. And Ustari's save is labeled, powerfully, as a fauxé, which, as you mentioned, is often translated as a divine intervention, a stroke of genius, something truly inspired. This save, according to the sources, completely changed the psychological momentum right before the break. The sources connect this specific crucial penalty stop to Ustari's overall performance throughout the first half, which is described elsewhere in the material you sent as making a few ridiculous saves. That kind of language, divine intervention, ridiculous saves, leaves absolutely no doubt about just how exceptional, how far above average his first-half performance truly was.
So, even without seeing the exact match stats like possession percentages or shot counts, based purely on the vivid descriptions provided in your sources, we can confidently infer certain things about the statistical flow of that first half. Correct.
Yeah, it seems abundantly clear. Based on Ahly Cairo's described control of the pace, their aggressive approach, and the number of dangerous chances they created that forced those incredible saves from Ustari, they likely held a significant edge in the first half stats. Probably higher possession, certainly more shots, and definitely a higher number of truly threatening attacks that required intervention.
Absolutely. And the most critical inference we can draw from the source material about the first half statistics is that while Al Ahly held these potential statistical advantages and created genuine, clear-cut opportunities to score, it was specifically Ustari's performance, his sequence of extraordinary saves, that directly prevented these statistical advantages from being reflected on the scoreboard. His individual brilliance was the single, isolated barrier preventing Al Ahly from taking what your sources suggest was a deserved lead. This brings us to a key analytical takeaway for the first half, one that your sources make explicitly. They don't just say Ustari was good, they repeatedly and emphatically call him the savior, or Newt for Inter Miami in that first 45 minutes. His performance wasn't just strong, it was described as extraordinary. Yeah, and the sources state that this level of goalkeeping directly and solely prevented Al Ahly from leading at halftime. And here's where your sources get really tactical in their analysis. They argue that Ustari's incredible match-saving performance actually masked or deeper, more systemic tactical issues for Miami. They specifically point back to the problems in midfield defense and overall organization. We discussed Busquets being easily bypassed. Your sources explain precisely why this was so critical. It meant Miami's central defense was being exposed without that necessary protective screen in front of the back line, made them fundamentally vulnerable to Al Ahly's attacks flowing through the middle and the flanks. So Ustari's saves, as your sources incisively put it, were instances of individual heroism in extreme situations. Your sources stressed these weren't saves made because Miami's defensive system was robust and pushing Al Ahly wide or forcing speculative shots. No, these were saves made because Al Ahly had successfully navigated Miami's defense and created high-quality chances inside the box. The conclusion drawn by your sources is stark. Miami had obvious tactical imbalances, defensive vulnerabilities in that first half, and, crucially, should have conceded multiple goals if not for Ustari's isolated, brilliant interventions. This performance, while heroic, highlighted the clear need for significant tactical adjustments at halftime.
Right, and your sources tell us that those crucial adjustments absolutely happened during the break and completely transformed the complexion, the flow of the game in the second half. Let's transition now to that second period. What did Inter Miami do after halftime, according to the sources you sent, to turn the tide so dramatically after being under such pressure? The sources are unequivocal. There were significant tactical adjustments made by Miami's coaching staff at halftime, and the impact of these changes, immediate and dramatic on the field. Miami surged in the second half, completely flipping the script. Instead of being pinned back, they started dominating possession and were actively creating several late chances. The sources state explicitly that the entire momentum of the match completely flipped from one half to the next.
And your sources pinpoint a key personnel and tactical factor that seemed to underpin this dramatic second-half improvement: the performance of Sergio Busquets. Remember how the sources highlighted him being easily bypassed in the first half? Well, according to your sources, that completely changed after halftime. They state he was more in control after the break, suggesting his role, maybe his positioning, or perhaps his defensive responsibilities were adjusted to make him more effective. Crucially, the sources note that in this improved state, he linked up with Messi. Now let's really unpack why that specific linkage, Busquets controlling the midfield and connecting with Messi, is so absolutely vital for Miami's attack, especially when they're trying to build from the back or establish possession in the opponent's half. Busquets' fundamental strength, it lies in his ability to receive the ball deep, retain possession calmly under pressure, and then make those incisive, often line-breaking passes, particularly finding Messi in dangerous pockets of space. When he has more control, as the sources say he did, it means he's winning more balls back. He's not being bypassed, and he's successfully completing more passes, especially forward passes. This improved midfield control and passing accuracy from Busquets allows for much better, quicker, and more effective ball distribution to the front players, giving Messi the ball in more dangerous areas, closer to the opponent's goal, and crucially with more time and space to operate his magic. Your sources argue that this improved midfield play, directly enabled by the tactical adjustments in Busquets' transformed performance, was the engine. The engine that allowed Miami to push their defensive and midfield lines higher up the pitch and attack Al Ahly much more effectively, much more sustainably in the second half. It wasn't just individual effort, it was a functional tactical change that successfully unlocked their attacking potential, which had been pretty much stifled in the first half.
And with Busquets now providing that crucial link and control in midfield, describe Messi's increased impact in the second half, according to your sources, now that he was better supported and, well, more involved. The sources say he became the most influential player on the field in the second half, even without scoring, just constantly creating threats, driving Miami forward. Your sources detail a specific chance in the 57th minute that really demonstrates this increased threat level. Messi had a powerful shot, described using the Chinese term, or directed towards the left post. And how did Al Ahly's goalkeeper, Mohamed Shenawy, respond to this clear danger from, well, arguably the world's best? The source calls it an agile save, highlighting Shenawy's quick reflexes and movement. He was clearly up to the task, too.
Yeah, and it's a positive point mentioned in the source material you sent, that throughout the match, there were no mentions of any significant or controversial refereeing calls. This is important because it means the narrative of the game itself, as reflected in your source's descriptions, could remain purely focused on the soccer, the tactical battle, the quality of play, the player performances, and crucially, those goalkeepers' heroics. There isn't any asterisk of a dubious penalty or a bad offside call hanging over the result, at least not according to the provided material. It allows the focus to stay on the purity of the on-field competition.
As the match entered its final stages, drew to a close, the sources indicate that Miami pushed hard for a winning goal, creating several more late opportunities. Describe the specific late chances mentioned in the sources, again highlighting Messi's continued central involvement in creating them. Yeah, the sources specifically point to a moment in the 85th minute. Messi, again the creator, delivering what the sources call a precise cross right into the penalty box. The target was Fafa Picault, who managed to get his head on the ball. How did that play out? Well, the sources say his header bounced and went just over the bar. It's described as a significant close-range missed opportunity right near the end of regular time. So close.
And building the tension to the absolute peak drama of the match, the sources describe the moment in stoppage time. Right at the very, very end. Who else but Messi creates the danger again, attempting to win the game for Miami with just seconds left? Your sources detail his shot. It was a signature curveball shot. The kind Messi has scored countless times, right? Seemingly curling and destined for that top corner of the net. And how did Shenawy respond to this? The ultimate test of the match. The final potential game-winning effort from arguably the greatest player ever. The sources describe an absolutely incredible world-class save. He reacted instantly, making a diving outstretched right hand save to deflect the ball. And the outcome? It hit off the crossbar. Wow, the sources even call it a single-handed save onto the crossbar, emphasizing the difficulty and the sheer brilliance of that one-handed intervention to keep the ball out. The sources then capture Messi's immediate reaction to this unbelievable save. He was visibly frustrated. I mean, you can picture it, can't you?
This entire sequence, Messi's iconic shot, Shenawy's physics-defying save. Messi's emotional reaction is explicitly described in your sources as the absolute peak drama of the match. The moment that perfectly, definitively showcased the incredible duel between the two goalkeepers that ultimately defined this game and resulted in that 0-0 scoreline.
And your sources don't just describe Miami's second-half dominance, they also provide an analysis of why it happened, stating it wasn't merely, a lucky shift in momentum, but a result of specific, deliberate actions. They attribute it directly to those significant tactical adjustments made by the coaching staff at halftime, specifically optimizing Sergio Busquets' role, his defensive and distributive duties in the midfield. And, crucially, they state that Miami's improved performance was the result of the perfect blend of these successful tactical tweaks with Lionel Messi's undeniable world-class individual ability, which could finally be unleashed when supported by a better structure.
Let's really deepen the analysis on that Busquets-Messi link, just as the sources do. The sources note that Busquets having more control in the second half wasn't just some abstract concept. It directly translated into Miami, significantly improving their possession stats, increasing their passing accuracy. This improved control and stability in the midfield, according to the sources, directly resulted in more touches on the ball and more opportunities for Messi to receive the ball in higher, more dangerous positions, allowing him to turn, run at defenders, initiate attacks closer to Al Ahly's goal. The sources point to Messi's numerous near goals, the shots hitting the post or crossbar, the ones forcing those amazing saves from Shenawy, as clear evidence that his threat remained absolutely huge. He wasn't playing poorly. He just either lacked that final inch of luck or, well, was consistently met by goalkeeping performing at an otherworldly level. The sources reiterate Messi's crucial role as a flag bearer. His mere presence on the CWC stage and the moments of brilliance he did produce undeniably lifted the entire team's performance and profile.
Even without scoring, his actions in the second half, particularly creating those dangerous chances, consistently being involved in attacking moves, showed his decisive influence. The sources argue he shouldn't just be seen as a finisher. He's a fundamental creator, effectively operates as a tactical engine for the team, especially when he's properly supported by the system and his teammates. This effect, where he didn't score but dominated the game in the second half, according to the sources, powerfully highlights his significant flag-bearer impact on the CWC stage, even in a goalless draw. And this successful implementation of tactical adjustments and the resulting significantly improved team performance in the second half also serve as confirmation, according to your sources, of the coaching staff's precise real-time adaptability, or 전iosa. The sources suggest the coaches clearly diagnosed the problems from the first half, made effective changes during the break, and those changes demonstrably worked to completely flip the game's momentum, allowed Miami to dominate control and creation, even if they couldn't find the net.
All right, since the ultimate score remains 0-0, your source material naturally, understandably, shifts the focus to where the real stars of the match were, the players who decisively impacted the scoreline. It states very clearly, repeatedly, that precisely because there were no goals, a different kind of player stood out, and that the sources believe Óscar Ustari of Inter Miami and Mohamed Shenawy of Ahly should unequivocally share the best player honor for this specific match.
And your sources dedicate significant, well-deserved detail to explaining why these two goalkeepers were so utterly exceptional, framing it almost as their personal battle, right? Their individual duel to keep their respective clean sheets against talented attacks. Let's dedicate ample time to detailing each goalkeeper's key saves, drawing directly from the source descriptions you sent, and emphasizing the impact of these interventions on the narrative and the final score. First, let's talk about Óscar Ustari for Inter Miami. The sources are incredibly high in their praise, repeatedly calling him the absolute hero of the first half. Let's go back through those moments your sources highlight. There was the penalty save against Trezeguet in the 43rd minute. Why was this save so monumentally crucial, according to the sources? Because the sources explicitly call it a golden opportunity for Ahly to take a lead just before halftime, a moment that could have completely changed the trajectory of the game.
Ustari's save is described as that fusha, a divine intervention or stroke of genius, which your sources suggest completely nullified Ahly's first-half dominance on the scoreboard and drastically shifted the psychological momentum. Prevented Miami from going into the break a goal down, which felt almost inevitable based on the play. Then, the sources mention the sequence of back-to-back saves that Ustari was forced into very early in the game, which came from well-crafted moves by Ahly. This wasn't just one save, it was multiple high-difficulty saves in quick succession, indicating the sustained high-pressure assault Miami was under, being repelled only by their goalkeeper. And the source specifically notes the save on the close-range header in the 32nd minute, again coming from a well-worked move, calling Ustari's action an instinctive stop, highlighting the quality and speed of his reflexes, his positioning, to deny a very dangerous opportunity. The sources use incredibly strong, decisive language to summarize Ustari's first-half performance. He was wonderful in goal. He made a few ridiculous saves. The stark conclusion the sources draw based on his performance is this:
He was the only reason Inter Miami didn't concede in the first half. His performance wasn't just good or solid, it was the single, isolated barrier against Ahly, capitalizing on their tactical dominance and numerous opportunities. Now, let's turn to Mohamed Shenawy of Ahly. Your sources identify him as the decisive key figure in the second half for Ahly, using that powerful term fuwen, which translates roughly to an anchor or a stabilizing force in turbulent times, suggesting he provided crucial reassurance and solidity when Miami surged forward. Let's look at his key moments highlighted by the sources. He made multiple saves against the revitalized Messi in the second half, which the sources describe as crucial saves, on-tone saves, agile saves. This indicates he was tested repeatedly by Miami's improved attack, led by Messi, and he consistently delivered. And the most dramatic moment of the entire match, which we've already touched upon but really bears repeating for its sheer impact and significance to this goalkeeper dual narrative, occurred in stoppage time. It was Shenawy's response to Messi's seemingly perfect, game-winning curveball shot.
The sources describe his action in vivid detail. It required a flying outstretched right hand, a leap of faith and athleticism to deflect the ball. And where did it go? It hit off the crossbar. The sources even add the specific detail of it being a single-handed save onto the crossbar, emphasizing the difficulty and the sheer brilliance of that one-handed intervention at full stretch to somehow push that curving shot onto the woodwork instead of into the net. This wasn't just a save, it was a match-preserving, point-securing, world-class intervention at the very last second that directly preserved the draw for Ahly. The sources commend his composure, his reaction speed, his sheer athleticism in these defining moments.
This incredible dual exhibition of goalkeeping brilliance brings us back to a central point your sources make about this specific 0-0 result. They call it explicitly a goalkeeper's victory, URCO. Explain why, according to your sources, this particular 0-0 wasn't the kind of dull draw that soccer fans often, lament.
Yeah, your sources are really keen to differentiate this 0-0. They explain that it absolutely did not stem from a lack of attacking creativity or poor offensive execution across the board, or genuinely impenetrable team defenses where attackers simply couldn't find space or get shots off. As we've detailed, the description of the match in your sources is just filled with mentions of key saves, golden opportunities, well-crafted moves, and almost goals hitting the post or bar. This narrative from the sources means that the attackers did successfully create clear, dangerous chances to score. The goalkeepers just consistently met those chances with extraordinary, often unbelievable, resistance.
Exactly. The sources explicitly state that the performances of both Ustari and Shenawy were far beyond average levels. The language they use is powerful to convey their impact. They almost single-handedly changed the course of the game. Woodfire. Effectively turning a match that, based on the opportunities created, could have easily had multiple goals, maybe 3 or 4, into a clean sheet. Their individual brilliance, their ability to deny high-quality chances again and again, was the single most decisive factor in determining the final scoreline. And what does this specific match, analyzed through the lens of your sources, suggest about the role of the modern goalkeeper in elite soccer? Well, the sources propose that their importance has reached a new height, birthday. They are no longer simply seen as the last line of defense, the protectors of the net. They're described as superheroes who possess the ability to directly decide match results. Jean Ouche.
This implies that a world-class goalkeeper isn't just reactive, but can proactively influence the game's outcome through their interventions in ways perhaps not always appreciated in the past. So what does this suggest about the delicate balance between high-quality attack and high-quality defense, particularly the role of the goalkeepers within that defense? The sources imply this match showcased a state of extreme balance. The attackers possess creativity, skill, tactical nous to create numerous dangerous opportunities, as shown by the quality of the chances Ustari and Shenawy faced. However, perhaps those attackers on this particular day lacked the absolute final precision, maybe the power or the variation needed to overcome goalkeepers performing at this specific elevated level, a level described by the sources as truly extraordinary. The sources don't necessarily lay blame entirely on the attacker's quality. Rather, they highlight the goalkeeper's exceptional match-defining performances as the primary reason the scale was tipped decisively in favor of defense on this particular historic afternoon.
Let's circle back briefly to the tactical battle, drawing again on the sources' half-by-half analysis we discussed earlier. The narrative provided by the sources is one of clear contrast, isn't it, in tactical execution and adaptation. Yeah, as the sources described, Al Ahly's first half plan was clear, ambitious, and initially executed highly effectively. That high press to disrupt Miami, quick transitions to exploit space, leveraging their physical advantage and creating those well-crafted moves, explicitly aiming to score early and completely throw Miami off their rhythm. Your sources suggest their plan was implemented with precision and nearly succeeded, only thwarted by Ustari's saves and, well, maybe the post.
Conversely, your sources detail Miami's significant struggles in the first half through a tactical lens. Their failure to adapt effectively to Al Ahly's intense pressure, their major issues with central midfield control, specifically highlighted by Busquets being easily bypassed. This tactical breakdown hindered their ability to build attacks from the back and left their defense dangerously exposed. The sources paint a picture of a passive, reactive start for Miami that tactically cost them dearly in terms of controlling the game and conceding dangerous chances. But then came Miami's crucial tactical shift in the second half, which your sources emphasize as the key factor in changing the game's flow. They explicitly state that Miami dominated more possession and were able to push their defensive and midfield lines higher up the pitch. The source suggests how they might have achieved this significant turnaround based on the resulting effects on the field, attributing it to tactical adjustments that could have involved tweaking the formation, altering player roles, or specifically focusing on enabling Busquets and Messi to operate more effectively as the central creative and organizing hub in the midfield. Your sources explicitly point to the success of this second-half adjustment as strong proof of the coaching staff's precise real-time adaptability. They weren't static. They saw the problems Al Ahly posed and Miami's struggles. They diagnosed the tactical issues during the break, and they implemented changes that, according to your sources, demonstrably worked to flip the game's momentum, allowed Miami to control possession and create chances, even if they couldn't finally break the deadlock.
Your sources also sprinkle in mentions of other key players involved in the match, highlighting their specific contributions or maybe struggles, just to add detail and texture to the overall picture. Let's highlight a few of these individuals based on the material you provided. Federico Redondo is mentioned, and his contribution is highlighted by stating his work rate cannot be questioned. This suggests he was providing valuable energy, coverage in the midfield, perhaps trying to compensate for some of the structural issues Miami faced, particularly in the first half. Ian Frey is described as being beaten and suppressed early on, indicating he struggled initially with Al Ahly's attack. But the source adds that he settled in thereafter, suggesting a degree of adaptation and resilience during the match, which is good to see.
Maxi Falcon is noted with a more critical description, being called chaotic and frenetic throughout. That kind of language suggests potential defensive instability or maybe a lack of composure from his perspective on the field. In contrast, Jordi Alba is credited with a tidy performance, and the source specifically notes that Al Ahly had little joy down his wing, indicating Miami had defensive stability and control on their left side thanks to his performance. Solid. The source also mentions that the absence of Yannick Bright, another midfielder, wasn't too badly felt, suggesting that despite the midfield issues, the team had decent depth, or that the players filling in managed adequately enough given the circumstances. Substitutes Marcelo Weigand and Talasco Segovia are given numerical ratings 6-10 and 5-10 respectively. But the source doesn't really elaborate on their specific impact with detailed descriptions, though, any personnel changes likely also contributed to Miami's altered tactical setup and improved performance in the second half. Now, your sources make a really critical and insightful point about the interplay between star players and the team system they play within, using Messi and Busquets from this very match as prime examples to illustrate the concept. Inter Miami clearly possesses top-tier global stars like Messi, Busquets, Jordi Alba. Yet, as we've detailed from the sources, they struggled significantly in the first half, with Busquets even being easily bypassed and the team lacking midfield control and flow. The sources use this situation to powerfully prove the point that simply stacking stars, just bringing in famous, talented players, doesn't automatically equate to having a strong system or a cohesive, effective team unit. If the underlying tactical structure, particularly in that crucial midfield area, is lost or not functioning correctly, the team's attack engine, which relies heavily on players like Messi and Busquets combining and creating, doesn't receive the necessary support, doesn't get the ball in the right areas, doesn't have the space needed to operate effectively. The sources present the fact that Busquets' improved control and increased effectiveness in the second half directly led to Messi getting more touches and more dangerous opportunities as concrete, on-field evidence of this dependency. It shows that star players' ability to perform at their best and impact the game is highly dependent on the system supporting them and the performance of their teammates creating the right conditions. While Messi's flag-bearer role is undoubtedly important for attracting global attention, inspiring teammates, elevating the club's profile, the sources emphasize that effective tactics, strong system design, cohesive teamwork are absolutely essential prerequisites to truly maximize his potential and translate his individual brilliance into consistent collective success and goal-scoring chances. Busquets' noticeable performance change from being bypassed in the first half to being in control in the second, according to your sources, acts as a barometer, a chip for the success of Miami's tactical adjustments. His shift directly correlated with Miami's ability to improve their control of the game and unlock their attack.
While your sources didn't provide us with precise match statistics like exact possession percentages, total shots, passes completed, what can we confidently infer about the statistical flow of the game based on the detailed half-by-half descriptions they provided? Well, based on Al Ahly's described aggressive start, high press, controlling the pace, creating numerous dangerous chances that forced Ustari into those back-to-back and instinctual saves, we can confidently infer they likely had the edge in the key first-half stats. Almost certainly higher possession, more shots, and definitely a higher proportion of genuinely threatening attacks inside the box.
Correct. And then conversely, with Miami making significant tactical adjustments at halftime and being described as dominating more possession, pushing their lines higher, creating several late chances in the second half, your sources suggest they likely had significantly more possession and a higher number of shots in that second period as they successfully took control of the game's tempo and territory. But crucially, your sources reiterate that the 0-0 result isn't indicative of a lack of attacking activity or statistical accumulation overall from both teams. It's a direct reflection of those attacks, those shots, those chances constantly being thwarted and denied by the extraordinary performances of the two goalkeepers. The raw stats might show attempts, but they wouldn't fully capture the quality of the saves and interventions that prevented them from becoming goals, which is the core story your sources tell about this match. Now, without having direct quotes from the coaches after the match, Based only on the events described in the sources and the analysis of the game's dynamics that your material provides, what might the coaches likely have said after the final whistle? We can kind of infer their probable perspectives based on the narrative, can't we? For the Al Ahly coach, based on your sources highlighting their very strong first half, the effective aggressive press, the quality of chances created, and particularly that clear opportunity from the penalty, he likely would have expressed significant satisfaction, pride in the team's execution, physicality, tactical discipline during the opening period. He'd praised their ability to impose themselves on a star-studded opponent. However, your sources also mention Al Ahly's regret over missing chances, especially the penalty, so he would almost certainly voice that disappointment, emphasize the need for more clinical finishing, and, without a doubt, he would offer high praise for Mohamed Shenawy for his crucial saves in the second half and for being that stabilizing force that secured the valuable point against Miami's resurgence. For the Inter-Miami coach, inferring from your source's description of the team's slow start, the significant defensive and midfield issues in the first half, particularly Busquets being bypassed, he likely would have expressed concern, perhaps frustration about that opening 45 minutes. But he would almost certainly heap praise and credit on the halftime tactical adjustments made and the team's significantly improved second-half performance, highlighting their ability to adapt and execute the new plan. The source highlights Ustari's savior role in the first half, so he would undoubtedly credit Ustari's heroism for keeping them in the game when they were struggling. He'd acknowledge Messi's constant threat and decisive influence in the second half, despite not scoring, and likely praise the team's overall resilience, their ability to adapt tactically under pressure, as your sources emphasize this successful adjustment.
Let's look at the immediate aftermath and the future implications of this 0-0 result based on what your sources say. How does this draw affect the dynamic of this tough group of death going forward? Well, as the source states very simply, both teams come away with 1 point. In a group shared with two other strong contenders like FC Porto and Palmeiras, who are also vying for those qualification spots. Starting with a draw keeps the group incredibly tight, using the term "I," which implies this complex, tense, closely contested situation where no team has an easy advantage.
Precisely. Your sources emphasize that with only 2 teams ultimately advancing from this competitive group, the remaining matches for both Inter Miami and Al Ahly immediately become like finals, or YOG. Every single mistake, every dropped point could potentially be fatal to their hopes of qualifying for the knockout stages. The draw means neither team is out, but it certainly puts significant pressure on their upcoming matches against Porto and Palmeiras. This outcome doesn't resolve anything. It simply intensifies the pressure and definitely increases the suspense and excitement for the group stage overall. Your sources also discuss the broader league-level impacts that stem from a team's performance in the CWC. Performing well in this tournament is seen as a significant way to boost a club's international reputation, increase its global brand value, attract attention. For Miami, their performance, especially with Lionel Messi involved, directly reflects on the level and quality of MLS as a league. Your sources mention that Messi's participation in the CWC specifically boosts MLS's global visibility and appeal.
The sources even speculate that Miami's competitive performance in a match like this could potentially help attract more high-level international players to MLS, helping both Miami consolidate their domestic status and potentially improving the league's overall international competitiveness for future tournaments. For Al Ahly, your sources explicitly state that their strong performance against a team featuring Messi, demonstrating their tactical discipline and fighting spirit, solidifies their dominance within African soccer and, crucially, earns greater respect for African clubs on the global stage. The sources also suggest that individual Al Ahly players performing well on this international platform, like Mohamed Shenawy clearly did, could attract interest and potential transfers from European clubs. This is seen not just as a benefit for the individual player, but as contributing positively to the development of African soccer more broadly by providing pathways to major European leagues. Overall, both teams, having now experienced the intensity and profile of the CWC, will likely use this performance and the lessons learned as a benchmark to set higher goals for their ongoing domestic seasons and future international ambitions.
What kind of immediate reactions would this dramatic 0-0 game likely have generated from fans, both for the specific clubs and the wider soccer community? And how would it have played out on social media according to the insights provided in your sources? Based on the sources, Miami fans would likely have experienced a very strong mix of emotions. There would undoubtedly be immense relief that they didn't lose, and tremendous pride in Óscar Stari's absolutely incredible match-saving heroics in the first half. I mean, he kept them in it single-handedly. But there would also be palpable regret, frustration over Lionel Messi's numerous near misses in the second half, and the team not managing to find a winning goal, especially after dominating that period. Social media, the sources suggest, would be absolutely buzzing, specifically about Messi's almost goals that hit the woodwork or forced world-class saves, and particularly about the super saves made by both goalkeepers throughout the match.
For Al Ahly fans, your sources imply there would be a deep sense of pride. Pride in challenging such a high-profile opponent featuring Messi, putting in such a strong, tactically disciplined performance, especially dominating the first half. They would appreciate the team's fighting spirit, defensive resilience. There would likely be regret, perhaps lingering frustration over the missed penalty opportunity in the first half, as the source highlights it as a major missed chance to win the game. But Mohamed Shenawy's stellar, game-preserving performance in the second half would certainly be a point of major celebration and pride for them. And more broadly, as the very first match of this brand-new, expanded format, your sources suggest this game would have sparked significant widespread discussion about the CWC itself. People would be debating its watchability, the level of competition displayed right from the start, its potential global impact. Your sources suggest that the very drama and intensity of this 0-0 draw the clear contrast between the halves. The high-quality chances, the incredible goalkeeper battle might actually make people more excited for the subsequent games in the tournament. Precisely because it demonstrated the competitiveness and unpredictability of the new format from day one. It showed that upsets and hard-fought contests are possible, making every match feel more meaningful.
Looking ahead beyond this opening match, what do your sources say about the next crucial matches for these teams? And what specific lessons from this 0-0 encounter do they suggest both Miami and Al Ahly need to take forward into those fixtures? The sources explicitly state the next fixtures that loom for both clubs. Inter Miami faces Portuguese giants, FC Porto, and Al Ahly takes on Brazilian powerhouse Palmeiras. Both are described as tough battles, using the term "boo," which implies difficult, physical, highly competitive matches. And critically, your sources note that both of these games are directly related to qualification from this tight group. Big games coming up.
And based on the detailed analysis of this match, what key lessons do your sources suggest both teams need to internalize and address? For Inter Miami, they absolutely need to address that slow start, the tactical issues in midfield that plagued them in the first half. They also need to improve their attacking efficiency, ensure they can convert the numerous chances they created in the second half, even when facing a top-tier goalkeeper. For Al Ahly, they need to maintain the aggressive tactical discipline, the fighting spirit they showed, particularly in the first half. But critically, they must improve their finishing, their overall chance conversion, specifically highlighting the need to avoid missing golden opportunities like that penalty in future crucial matches. Can't afford those misses at this level.
Finally, let's consider the potential long-term impacts on the clubs beyond just this tournament, based on what your sources suggest. Will performing, or even just participating, in the CWC influence their activity in future transfer markets? How might this play out? Your sources suggest that, yeah, it likely will. For Miami, the impact of having Lionel Messi continues to be massive. They are already attracting global attention because of him, right? And performing on the CWC stage, even with a draw, continues that trend, keeps them in the global spotlight. The sources indicate their participation and performance will likely support their efforts to bring in more high-level international players in the future, aiming to strengthen their squad both domestically for MLS and for potential future international competitions.
And for Al Ahly, your sources explicitly mentioned that their players performing well on this major international platform, going toe-to-toe with global superstars and excelling like El Shenawy did, could very well attract significant attention, potential interest from European clubs. This is seen not just as beneficial for the individual players' careers, but as a positive contribution to the development of African soccer more broadly, by providing visible pathways for African talent to move into major European leagues. Overall, both teams, having experienced the intensity, the challenges, the global exposure of the CWC, will likely use this performance as a catalyst to set even higher goals and ambitions for their ongoing and future seasons.
So, to bring this deep dive into your source material to a close, the core finding is crystal clear, isn't it? Undeniable. The 0-0 draw between Inter Miami and Al Ahly in the opening match of the expanded FIFA Club World Cup was anything but boring. It was a tense, dramatic, back-and-forth battle that was ultimately defined not by attacking brilliance finding the net, but by the utterly incredible, game-saving performances of the two men between the posts, Óscar Ustari and Mohamed Shenawy. They weren't just good keepers on the day, they were, according to your sources, the co-best players, the superheroes who decisively impacted the scoreline and, frankly, stole the show with their saves.
And the main tactical takeaway from the sources is that striking, almost jarring, difference between the two halves. Al Ahly's strong, aggressive start completely exposed Miami's early struggles, particularly their significant issues in midfield control and defensive organization. But Miami's successful tactical adjustment at halftime, spearheaded by Sergio Busquets' transformed and more controlled performance, completely flipped the script, allowing Miami to dominate the second half. This narrative powerfully highlights the crucial point, emphasized by your sources, that even superstar players like Lionel Messi need a functional system, effective tactical support, midfield control underlined by Busquets' performance change, acting as that barometer to truly maximize their effectiveness and translate individual talent into collective results and chances.
And let's not forget the broader significance of this specific 0-0 result for the tournament itself, as highlighted by your sources. They argue it immediately set a high bar for competition, challenging any prior assumptions about easy dominance for certain confederations or the tournament feeling like an exhibition. It proved right from day one that teams from different parts of the world, like the African champions Al Ahly, can compete at the highest level against global brands like Inter Miami and get results, significantly increasing the drama, the suspense, the excitement in this group of death, and really for the CWC as a whole.
And to leave you with a final thought to consider, one that builds on the fascinating points unearthed from this source material you sent. In a sport so often defined, celebrated, judged solely by goals scored, what does a game like this, a captivating 0-0, where individual brilliance in defense, specifically from the goalkeepers, was the overwhelming match-defining factor, tell us about where modern elite soccer is heading? Or perhaps does this hard-fought, dramatic 0-0 draw, maybe more than a comfortable high-scoring win for a perceived favorite ever could have, truly signal the arrival of a more globally competitive and unpredictable club landscape in this new, expanded tournament format that FIFA is aiming for? Looking back at the sources you shared, what stands out to you most from this deep dive into the opening act of the new Club World Cup?
Thank you so much, as always, for sharing these incredibly fascinating sources with us. They gave us so much detail, so many insights to really dig into.
Absolutely. Having this material allowed us to conduct a truly thorough deep dive and gain a comprehensive understanding of this pivotal CWC opening match. Allowed us to dissect the key moments, analyze the player battles, and unpack the complete tactical story behind the final scoreline, all drawn directly and meticulously from the information you provided.
Keep those sources coming our way. We absolutely love getting lost in them and bringing you the distilled insights from the information you care about. Until the next time we take a deep dive into the information you share.